Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, someone you'd ask if you were in the market for a good exorcist, Josh Stifter, a movie analyzing father of two, animator and director who is here to talk not only about his new movie, Greywood's plot, but also one of the most popular crushes from the 90s, an after-school crush many admire, Amy Jo Johnson, aka the OG Pink Power Ranger. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. This is my second Power Ranger in like a month. So
is it really?
we had Billy a month or so ago. So we're going to Pink now.
That's fantastic.
I was a little bit younger than you when the Power Rangers kicked off, and I remember. Yes, it was just like an obsession wave just took over all of us. But like when it started, I wasn't immediately attached to any of them like a crush until Tommy came along, but that's another story. But were your feelings for Kimberly kind of like instantaneous?
Yeah, I think so. And it was funny because when I got the question about the crush, I had to dig like really deep and try to think about, because I'm hate to say it, but I'm in my mid-30s. And so like trying to think about the first time I got a crush was really challenging. But I definitely remember that was the first like real weird feeling of like, oh, I like girls. I do. I really do. And it was her. And I think the big thing was like, she was doing flips and kicking butt, and there was something like super strong about her character that I really liked. And yeah, definitely it was pretty immediate.
Well, that's interesting you say there was something like really strong about her, because when I was, like I said, we talked about Billy, the Blue Ranger, a month or so ago with Miller C. Lashbrook, a fellow podcaster, and that was his nerdy crush. And we kind of talked about Kimberly being a lot of boys' crush, along with maybe like Kelly from Saved by the Bell and Topanga from Boy Meets World, because they kind of fit this quintessential girl next door look. And yep. I like seeing like how those years, we were like so removed from the wholesome days of like Leave It to Beaver. Do you think that characters like that were sort of a way to keep kids mentally in that Leave It to Beaver mindset? Like, let's push these like kind of sweet, innocent looking girls.
It's funny that you talk about like the other people like Topanga and the other sitcom girls didn't really do much for me for some reason. I liked the fact that Kimberly was punching monsters. That was like a big thing for me. And when I started thinking about my other crushes as I got older, it was always the like girl who could kick butt and was stronger than a lot of other people. But you're right, her look was very girl next door and very sweet. So I think she was like a happy medium for me of being like, okay, so there's something, she's an action hero to a 6-year-old or 10-year-old or whatever I was at the time, 8, 9, something like that. And she could still kick some butt, but she also had that girl next door that was, yeah, you're right, like Leave It to Beavery. That there was that wholesomeness. But it's funny because then thinking about my following crushes, they weren't that at all. They were much more like the really strong, like almost, this is really weird to say, but like maternal, like tough type, like Ripley from Alien, stuff like that.
I mean, we'll get to those other crushes because I did find it interesting, the shift that you took. But like I said in the beginning, Kimberly is such an iconic crush of the 90s.
Right.
For so many, it was their first crush. And I know like for my age, it was like Tommy, maybe Jason. I feel like you're into that, not for me. And for us, like later boy bands became the thing. And I felt like girls were very territorial with their crushes. And maybe even still today, were boys like that when you were growing up? Did you like fight over Kimberly, or did you kind of keep it to yourself? Like, that's my girl, but they don't need to know.
Kept it to myself, 100%. No guy talked about that at all at that age. We all kept it to ourselves, and we would like, there was no talking about it. There was no, whispers. There was definitely no territorial element. If someone was like, there's no way at 8 or 9 we use the term like a term like hot, but if someone was like, oh, she's so pretty, you'd just be like, oh yeah, weirdo. Even though you're thinking the exact same thing.
That's interesting. And did you have any jealousy towards Jason and or Tommy? Because they always seem to like link Kimberly more so to Tommy. That's why I didn't like her personally.
That's so funny. You know what? I don't know if I ever thought about it. Like, it was such a weird, uncomfortable crush to have, like being a 8, 9-year-old boy having a crush. You're really like almost trying to be like, I don't have this feeling. I gotta push it away. This isn't something I'm supposed to feel. So I don't think it was so much like a jealousy thing. I think it was more I'm gonna keep this secret and not tell anyone. Except for, I definitely remember there's an element of when the action, because that was still young enough that the action figures were hitting. And I remember having all of the, toys for Power Rangers. And I remember whichever guy I had, probably Jason. I think it was probably Jason that would just become me. Like deep down, I was like, this one's me. I'm going to pretend like I'm Jason. I'm not even going to disconnect these two. It's just me now.
I mean, you kind of had similar names with the J, so.
Yeah.
Did you wear a lot of red?
No, not really. I actually wore more blue. Maybe at that time I did wear red. It's hard to remember if I actually completely connected. But even then, if I started to wear a lot of red, I would fear that my friends would be like, what are you trying to be like, Jason?
That was the thing, though. You kind of picked one, and then you're like, I'm going to base my whole wardrobe. I mean, one of my favorite colors is still yellow. I have the word yellow tattooed on me. I have the Yellow Ranger tattoo, so...
That's funny. I think I was more blue, but that was because of the Ninja Turtles. So I had grown up on the Ninja Turtles and already connected to blue. And so I just kept blue as my color because I was a big Leonardo fan, which is funny because I later in life, my son's name is Raphael. And we're a very, very red house because of Raphael loving red. So
still connecting to Jason all these years.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
So I don't want to go any further without talking about the fact that your mom's name is Kim. And because you noted that calling the Pink Ranger that was just like a big no for you. Is that still a pet peeve you carry like to this day, almost like 3 decades later?
It really is. When anyone says, when there's someone else named Kim, I'm like, it's weird because I'm almost realizing I'm more territorial of the fact that my mom's name is Kim, so like no one else can have it. There's like an uncomfortableness of anyone else named Kim. I'm like, it's Kimberly or it's Kimmy or it's something else, but not Kim. And that definitely, that drove me nuts. When friends would say Kim, or even on the show, when someone would say, hey, Kim, come check this out. I'd be like, no, don't. It's Kimberly or Kimmy, but not Kim.
My husband's cousin is named, he's married to a woman named Donna, and his mother's name is Donna, and I find that so strange.
I dated a girl named Kimberly in high school, and it was a very strange moment.
No, I couldn't. My dad and my brother are named Ray. My middle name is Ray. It just would never work with me and a Ray.
That's so funny. Raphael was also named after my grandpa Ray.
Oh, okay.
Just a weird little like side note, but yeah, that it was definitely a weird thing to date a girl named Kimberly, and it didn't last very long. But I never called her Kim, that's for sure. But the friends calling her Kim or anyone calling Kimberly from Power Rangers that name drove me nuts.
I can imagine. And you already mentioned you did have the action figures.
I did.
And you took it a step further than most of us, I think. You started making little movies with your Power Ranger toys. Was this the show that kind of inspired you to do that?
Definitely. That era of television when it was like The Simpsons, Power Rangers, Ren and Stimpy, like that was my life. And those were the shows, the 90s shows that made me as a little kid go, okay, I want to take this beyond just watching it. I want to try to make it as well. And because I connected so much to the Power Rangers, they just had such iconic characters with attachment to the colors. As a kid, you could instantly like relate to just who they were as characters, and it made me want to tell my own stories with those characters. So I would steal my dad's VHS camera when he wasn't looking and shoot little like stop motion. I even struggled to call them stop motion. It was like a weird form of puppetry where they would just kind of bounce around and then, like I would make them spin. It was almost like the commercials, the toy commercials they play.
I was just going to ask you, were you inspired at all by the toy commercials of the 90s? Because they always made them seem so much cooler, and then when you get home, they were not like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally what I was doing, was recreating those commercials. And I'd be like, you could see me in the background, like spinning the character or like pressing the button to make it shoot. But I was like, they do it in the commercials. I'm okay to do it that way. But I would write my own stories, and I would make my own, my own Rita monsters that came down were like made out of clay or made out of household items that I'd put like googly eyeballs on. I'd be like, now they're fighting the vacuum monster or whatever.
Well, your love of movies lasted, but unfortunately, the crush didn't. A couple years passed, and you kind of moved on to a girl in the neighborhood. That was probably like around 4th or 5th grade, if my math is correct. Do you think the first wave of like those like puberty hormones is the reason you kind of stepped away from the fictional and went to like a real girl?
Yeah, definitely. And I when I put that in there, I was trying to think how it went exactly, because that's so long ago. My brain sort of has a hard time wrapping around how it went. But I definitely remember jumping at that time. Power Rangers, Kimberly was definitely my first, and then. But I think I jumped to a few more along the way, and there were those few that I was like you brought up Topanga, which was like a lot of guys in our era's first crush. And for me, I think she was definitely one of those where I'm like, oh yeah, she's cute as well. And then there was the girl down the street that I was like, okay, how do I get her attention? And it was that, pubescent, prepubescent era, just getting into middle school, getting ready, thinking about like, okay, in high school, my parents are going to be cool with me actually dating. So I got to start, stepping away from the television.
And I mean, yeah, for some people, but some of us, like, we think that's going to happen. And then we, like, look at ourselves in the mirror after puberty and we're like, yeah, it's not, maybe college is going to be our time.
I'm going to be honest. I mean, I don't think it ever goes away. I think I still, even at my age, married with 2 children, I'll turn to my wife and I'll be like, she's really cute, right? And my wife is like, oh, come on. You like, just stop. But I definitely had those. I remember there was, what was that show called? Oh my gosh, I am like totally blanking. But there was a movie, or like an adaptation of the movie or of the TV show Lost in Space, and they did a movie version of it.
Oh, Galaxy Quest?
No, it was called Lost in Space. Oh. The movie was called Lost in Space. I can't remember what the actress's name was though from it. Lacey Chabert, something like that. And I remember when that came out, that was like the year before I went to high school, and I had a huge crush on her that year. And that was like, I had just started like actually dating girls, and that was a massive crush. And she was on a show, and I can't remember what the show was called. Party of Five? She was on Party of Five, yeah. And
the Orphans.
I had no reason to enjoy Party of Five, but I tuned in for her every week. And so it definitely continued, and it continued even, like through high school. I don't think it ever really goes away.
I mean, Party of Five stacked that cast with Tiger Beat centerfolds, the brothers, Nev Campbell, Lacey Chabert.
That's right.
All like a gorgeous family in an unfortunate circumstance.
Right.
Parents were dead.
That's so funny. It's been so long since I've thought about the Party of Five.
Well, hopefully people will listen and then they'll go binge it or something. But now it's time to write a movie in which you and Kimberly were a match made in heaven. What do you think the genre of this film would be like? And would it have a happy ending?
Well, for me, I mean, it's me. I make horror movies and comedy horror, so it would definitely have to be in the comedy horror genre. I think
romance.
There would be romance. There would be, but I think it would be very awkward romance. It'd be me like stumbling around a lot, and we'd be in a world of monsters or something, and I'd be trying to capture the attention. Although, like, bringing this up, I think that this would be a wonderful movie because like she's like 20 years older than me. So there's something really fun about the fact that it would be me, chasing after an older woman. I really like this concept. I
just had a Felicia Rashad crush on the Cosby Show, and she's in her 70s, and he was actually he wanted to make a TV show called Age Gap with him and Felicia. So now you have an idea too.
Yeah, I love this, but I think that there would be something with monsters and awkward moments of me trying to impress the older woman.
Well, speaking of older, as you continued to get older, like you said, your crushes kind of took a turn. You went from the girl next door to Scully from the X Files,
I
who is
did.
definitely a 90s iconic crush of all her own, and Linda Cardinelli from Freaks and Geeks. Would you say those characters are, well, like, they mirrored kind of who you liked later in life as an adult?
I think so. I like the type of girl who speaks her mind but also has a little bit of an awkward side, which my wife would be like, "Yes, you do. I get it." So like, in Freaks and Geeks, the whole time she's trying to find herself, but also like not afraid to talk back to her parents in an era where that was like kind of unheard of. And so I really liked that, I think. And that came out around the time I was just either getting out of high school, or I was in high school at the time that Freaks and Geeks came out, and I watched it on TV and could kind of relate and had that actual crush of like, oh, this is like a girl who is sort of in my age group, and I kind of am figuring out who I want to, like, the kind of girl I'm looking for.
Mhm.
But Scully was so confident. I liked the confidence of Scully, even though she had her awkward moments and her sort of weird personality. I liked the fact that she was, she was so smart and so tough when she had to be. That was always something that I dug. I think it definitely, I'm literally describing my wife right now. So,
And since you mentioned we're talking about X-Files, is that what kickstarted your interest in horror or sci-fi? Or was it the Lost Relic that is like those 90s tabloids that featured like the likes of Batboy?
yeah, big time. X-Files was the show that Daniel and I, who, Daniel is my co-conspirator on all of these movies. He is the two of us, we would get together and just watch X-Files, and we would talk about the monster movies we want to make and talk about, how we dissect each episode. And I think a lot of those dissections were what ended up making the movies that we made, the reason why we went on to make the sort of horror comedies. There was a lot of horror comedies that we watched later, but some of those episodes of X-Files were really funny, and there was a lot of comedy mixed in with the scares, and there was, these crazy moments, things that were not being shown anywhere else on television. Those were what we wanted to make. We wanted to shock people, and we wanted to do weird things, and that's why Greywood's Plot and The Good Exorcist have come out the way they are. We learned a lot from that.
Well, in Greywood's Plot, it definitely took me back to those headlines on those stories because it features one of my favorite cover stories, the Chupacabra.
Yeah.
I just love saying the word.
I do too.
And before we get to the creature of it all, I want to talk a bit about like the feature itself. It's about a paranormal blogger who's kind of about to hang it up, but he gets a video that gives him sort of this adrenaline boost and to keep on going. Was this sort of a love letter to creatives out there? Because we all know how hard it gets, and sometimes we don't want to continue our creative endeavors. So any of that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I've been making movies and making YouTube videos and doing podcasts and doing so much stuff my entire life. I was in a band. Daniel just reminded me on another interview that we were in a band in high school, and I totally forgot that we thought we were going to be rock stars. Like, we've done it all. And so I think that there's definitely a through line of this movie about, as kind of dark and creepy as it goes, there's an element of happiness in pursuing your art, even if it feels like it's destroying you. And so, with Dom sort of struggling with his craft, there's definitely a self-aware element to this movie that I was digging pretty deep into the way I feel at times, and the way I think a lot of us as artists feel at times when, the accolades aren't coming and you're not sure whether you're going to continue on. There definitely is an element of that I found that I wanted to speak about in this movie.
I think a lot of people, especially creative people, are going to definitely see that. It's something I saw and felt right away as a creative person who's kind of done it all as well. Not a band though. Unfortunately, I never want to be a rock star. I went to a lot of concerts though. But back to the creature, the chupacabra is mentioned, but but the trailer gives me like other spooky things too. Like there was like the little guy drawn that looked part spider, and that gave me like nightmares, definitely. But with cryptozoology, there's like a million ways you can go. My nephew's really into that right now, so I
Right
hear
on.
a lot about it. What made you settle on the creatures that are in Greywood's plot?
A lot of them came down to what we could do with no budget. We made this movie with very, very little. And so we sort of came up with these concepts of what we could like what effects do we have at our disposal? What monster masks do we already have that we can build off of and make something new? And what are we just generally interested in? There's a whole sequence of a living forest, people kind of grown into the trees, having their organs harvested. And I always wanted to do a living forest. That was like a big thing when in that era of the 90s, when I was growing up and into those things. It was like Mortal Kombat had a living forest. There was all of these different, creatures that had tree monsters. There's a weird one. It's not really a monster, but there was a game, Kirby game that had a tree monster in it that you fought, and I always just wanted to do tree monsters, so I put that in the movie. Chupacabra kind of came in almost accidentally because we wanted there to be an element of dogs and man's best friend, and when you see the movie, there's like a big piece of that movie that is about best friends and the divorce of friendship, but also the like rejuvenating of friendship. And so dogs play a big part in the movie. And obviously Chupacabra is sort of a wild, dog monster of sorts that sucks goat's blood, is like the old adage. And so, that's the Chupacabra sort of came naturally from that. I'm a huge, like you said, I just love saying Chupacabra. I could say
Such a fun word.
It is.
I wanted my 18th birthday cake to say Kutikente Chupacabra, but my mom couldn't spell any of it, so it just said Happy Birthday Kendra. She was like, I went to Albertsons and none of us could figure it out. 'Cause I just love that just rolls off the tongue.
That's so fun.
You mentioned tree monsters. I instantly thought of those creepy trees in the McDonald's Playland back in the 90s. Oh God, you should have put those in them. Those are terrifying. That would have been funny too.
Or the trees in Wizard of Oz. I grew up in the age where you basically like would sit around and wait for movies to play on TV on Sunday night. And I remember Wizard of Oz would play constantly. And my favorite scene in the movie was when the trees are throwing the apples at her, because it's just such a crazy, weird, dark moment.
You just really like tree monsters.
I do. I am a huge tree monster fan.
And in your career, you've loved tree monsters, but you've also worked with like the likes of Kevin Smith, that Robert Rodriguez is in there. Did you take anything you learned from those experiences and implement them into Greywood's plot?
Oh yeah, big time. I feel like everything I've made is just sort of building off of the last thing I learned. I didn't go to film school directly. I went to animation school. And so as I got into live action filming and wanted to make features, I had to kind of build off of the animation and build off of what I learned from Kevin and sort of the story beats I learned doing cartoons for him. And then when I got on Robert Rodriguez's reality show, Rebel Without a Crew, that's how I made my first feature, The Good Exorcist, was with him. And so I went on that show just thinking, this is going to be my film school. This is how I'm going to break into film. And so any little nugget of information I could get from Robert, whether that was towards making independent film or even simple things like Robert saying, on the show, I wore a hat with a hamburger on it because it had a logo on it for another company. And they were like, hey man, we can't let you wear that hat because it's a logo. We'd have to blur it out all the time. And I was like, well, I don't want a hat that just has nothing on it. I need something on it. So a PA ran to a store with like an arts and crafts store and came back with a bunch of patches. And there was like a sloth, there was a mountain range, there was a burger, and there was a cat. And I was like, I'm starving for a burger right now. I'll go with the burger. And can we go get lunch? Like, that would be amazing if we could go get lunch. So I got stuck with this burger hat. And I remember at one point, Robert turned to me and he's like, hey man, I'm just going to tell you right now, I put on this cowboy hat like year 2 of being a filmmaker, and I'm not allowed to take it off
Oh.
anymore. If you wear this burger hat, you are going to be attached to the burger hat for the next 10 years. So be careful with what you wear and what your personality shows, because that's what everyone expects from you from then on out. I was like, that is a wise piece of information.
It's interesting. I wonder if there's any other like people we've seen. Like, I wonder if that's why Kevin Smith always wears the jorts.
Exactly right. Like, they get attached to this personality and they're kind of forced to wear that thing, and because it is how you're kind of recognized. And at a certain point, you probably go like, man, I wish I wasn't wearing this. I did take off the burger hat, and I've just kind of become accustomed to wearing odd hats. Like, I've made my thing wear different ones, not just a hamburger.
It's kind of like the Power Rangers in their colors.
Exactly right.
Which, to circle back to your Power Ranger crush, if you can make like a horror movie about one of the Power Ranger villains, which would it be?
Oh, that eyeball one. There's the weird monster that's like all eyeballs. That's such a trip. And I seriously, like, to this day, in fact, I didn't even put this together. I just wrote a scene in a script recently where a character is like covered in eyeballs. And I thought I was sort of referencing the weird eyeball fingers in Beetlejuice. But I think in reality, in my head, the eyeballs go all the way back to the Power Rangers.
Definitely that one is very memorable. And the pig with like
the pig.
Just because it ate funny.
Yes.
It wasn't eating at all.
Too. That is a great one. And it's funny because now my 6-year-old now, he just turned 6. My 6-year-old is really into Power Rangers. And so we read the comics, and I'll sometimes sit down with him while he watches, and he watches them all. Like, there's, oh my God, so many different Power Rangers at this point.
It's forever.
It is so much. And so I'll sit down with him and just like watch an episode, and they're still making crazy monsters that I'm like, oh my gosh, I could put something like that in one of my movies.
And you mentioned you were working on a script. Is that like your next project on the horizon?
Yeah, so I'm working on a feature right now. During the pandemic, I shot a movie in my basement by myself. I shot a whole feature. It's called Scumbag, and it's me in a gas mask filming myself with monsters trying to attack while this guy is bunkered. My wife allowed me to turn my entire basement into this creepy bunker. So I filmed that right before we moved from Minnesota to Atlanta, and I'm in the process of editing it right now. But I finished a script for a movie that's tentatively titled Band-Aid Face, but the title is subject to change because Band-Aid is a copywritten company. They've restricted. So who knows if they'll allow me to use the term Band-Aid Face. But for right now, the slasher character of the movie is named Band-Aid Face. So we've just been calling the script that. But it's my take on sort of a slasher film. It's sort of like Nightmare on Elm Street mixed with it's a really strange, dreamy movie. But I'm really proud of the script, and we're hoping to be filming in February.
Oh, cool. And as for this, will be out by the time Greywood's plot is out. So where can people, watch that, check it out, find you online?
Yeah, I'm all over the social media. So if you're curious where to find it, just hop on over to Twitter. I'm at Josh Stifter. I'm on Instagram. At Flush Studios. Flush Studios is my company. And I think we also have at Flush Studios on Twitter. So check those out to follow along with what we're up to. But you can see Greywood's plot on all of the streaming platforms that you can rent or buy movies on. So Vudu, iTunes, Amazon, and The Good Exorcist is available as well. My first feature is available on all those platforms, and also on streaming for free on Tubi. And it's also available on Blu-ray through Troma, so Troma Direct.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your after-school crush. It was fun. And
it was awesome.
You can find all of Josh's and Greywood's plots. I'm sorry, I messed that up.
No, you're
information below. And until next time, keep crushing it.